The Seriously Wrong Housework Special with your hosts, Sean Villiers and Aaron Moritz. Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for being here. Thank you for keeping your houses spick and span. We know you're putting in a lot of hard work out there.
That elbow grease. The thing about housework is it never ends. You know, you just finish it and then bim, bam, boom, there's more housework to do. So I appreciate you guys all pushing that rock up that hill week after week because your houses look amazing.
Yeah, and we know. We've been watching. We've got cameras and we see what's going on.
Small cameras, crawling cameras, flying cameras.
Obviously, we don't see anything super private like you in the bathroom or anything like that, but we do see how clean things are.
We don't even review the footage personally.
Yeah, that's true. Most of the time. You know, occasionally you check in, but...
Well, and I have to say, Aaron, your house is looking absolutely fantastic with the amount of cleaning that you've done to it. What's your secret?
Just do it. Just do it. That's what I like to say. Like the Nike slogan, that's what I always think of. Just do it.
Yeah, for me, I'll often sit there in my mess and I'll say, what am I doing? Look at this place. And I look in the mirror. I'm like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? And I'm like, stupid Sean.
The classic shame, beating yourself.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not good enough. This is a moral failing. I look in the mirror. I'm like, who are you? Fuck you.
Oh, is that why you have so many broken mirrors? You're just kind of like bashing your head against the mirror and
constantly,
shame.
Yeah. It's one of the only ways I can actually get cleaning. But once I get going, I am like the Tasmanian devil with a mop. I am just incredible. Yeah, I mean, I thought about doing it professionally, but then I thought that would take all the fun out of it.
We now go to an anarchist punk house where roommates are having a dispute over doing the dishes.
Hey, Oily, we gotta talk, man.
Hey, man, Smear, what's up? How's it going?
It's been your turn to do the dishes for like 3 weeks now. It's stinking, it's putrid, it's a pile. It's just absolutely rotten over there, dude. It's just...
There's so many dishes there, it's disgusting. It doesn't even seem fair that I should have to do it because they've been piling up for so long.
Well, they wouldn't have piled up if you did them when it was your turn. Like, everyone's waiting for you to finish your turn. It's the chore wheel.
Yeah, but I really don't like it. It doesn't seem fair that someone who hates doing them as much as I do should have to do them. It's like, if it's worse for me emotionally to have to do it than for you, then it's kind of asking a lot out of me. It's really disgusting. Maybe we just shouldn't even have dishes. What if we just got rid of all the dishes? We could just finally be free, you know, like... True anarchists. Eat out of the box.
Okay, man, I'm sorry. I gotta call a house meeting. Like, you need to do these things. Like, we all need dishes, man. Okay.
Well, I beg to differ, but... And so, later that evening, all of the housemates gathered for a house meeting.
So look, guys, Oily, it's been their turn to do the dishes for 3 weeks, okay? They're supposed to do it the first week, and the dishes have been piling up for 3 weeks because they didn't do it, and now it's disgusting and gross. But they got to do it. It's their job, you know? Like, it's starting to have a smell. There's not enough dishes available. And this whole thing, it's just a trauma for me, and it's a trigger for me, and we just need this dealt with today democratically. House meeting, we need to order them to do their house duty. Okay?
Yeah, so I guess the only thing I really have to say is, I thought we were anarchists. I didn't know we were about bossing people around and ordering people to do things. And I thought this was more of a collaborative volunteer kind of thing. And honestly, I'm just going with the flow. I'm easygoing. The dishes are there, you know. I don't really want to do them. Maybe eventually I will. But that's up to me. I think if Smear wants the dishes done on Smear's timetable, then Smear should do the dishes.
Well, what right does Smear or any of us have to compel the actions of another? Oily's just doing their thing.
If the dirty dishes don't bother Oily, then I don't know why Smear has to get up in their face about it. Smear, I don't know. If you're the one traumatized and triggered by it, maybe you should be the one to be fixing it. I don't mind the dirty dishes.
Smear, I'm inclined to agree with you, but the way that you said it was kind of alienating to me.
Yeah, talking about ordering people around? Is that what we're really about?
On the authority of boots, I defer to the bootmaker. On the authority of washing dishes, I defer to the person who's nagging people about washing dishes.
All those in favor of passing off Oily's turn on the dishes to Smear, say aye. Aye.
I
Aye.
Hi, you've reached Smear. Oh, direct action tonight? Feeding the homeless? Oh, that sounds awesome. But, I can't make it, man. I gotta wash dishes again. I gotta wash everyone's dishes in the whole house. Yeah, I know. You're telling me. Yeah, no, but I'm actually washing dishes right now. I got you on my headset. Yeah, the dishes never stop. Yep. Yeah, no, I'm a dishwashing machine. I'm a part of something bigger than myself. Do I resent it? Yes. Do I wish I could leave? Yes. But I'm just... Look, we had a Democratic House meeting and it's fair. But sorry, I'm gonna have to let you go. I just got another big pile of anarcho dishes that I need to anarcho wash at my anarcho non-job that the anarcho democratic body has anarcho assigned me by threat of anarcho force. So, but yeah, I'll see you soon. I mean, well, you're gonna have to come down here to see me soon because I'm always washing dishes forever now. And that's the end of the story, I guess, for me. Okay, bye.
So yeah, Housework. It's kind of a universal experience for most people. Like, I mean, we've been talking about rich people the last couple episodes, and they're kind of like exempt from it. They get to pay other people to do it. But for most people, housework is like this constant thing that starts when you're a kid, whenever your parents think you're old enough to start getting you to help out around the house, and basically goes forever until you're too old or disabled in ways that you can't do it. It's kind of like this constant gnawing force of like keeping the chaos at bay. Like there's just things are constantly getting worse and you have to constantly be doing things to upkeep.
Yeah, dust accrues on surfaces and carpets get crumbs, and no matter how hard you try, we always leave kind of a snail trail of future housework behind us.
Yeah, scum builds up in the showers, and even if there's no humans there, leaving the snail trail, just the sort of decay of time. Like, if you leave your house empty for a year, there's still going to be housework to do. Even if it's in pristine condition, when you get back, there will be more work to do. There's always more work to do. And like you can retire from your career at a certain point, probably. Housework you either have to do or you have to pay someone to do. It's a constant, ongoing, never-ending thing. It's kind of like a great equalizer in a way. Again, with the exception of the people whom our society has said don't have to participate in it.
But yeah, it's also the great unequalizer in the sense that in, I don't have the stats in front of me, but in domestic partnerships with a man and a woman, women do a disproportionate amount of the housework.
Oh, yeah.
There's like a gender divide on how housework is done that has like some historic traditionalist values underpinning it. But also it like embodies itself in people's lives in ways that aren't even framed in terms of gender at the time that the failed division of labor is happening. Like in these domestic partnerships with a man and a woman where men do less housework and they do less child rearing and less dishes, less laundry, etc. In those environments, those men are rarely saying, oh, this is the way it should be because women should naturally do housework. It embodies itself in different ways in those relationships related to like socialization as children and what sort of work women are tuned into versus men are tuned into. So yeah, when you said the great equalizer, I couldn't help but evoke for me, I've just been doing a bunch of reading on feminist theory around housework. And I know what you mean in calling it the great equalizer, because it is in the sense that we're all plagued by this trail of housework wherever we go. But the great equalizer has been distributed unfairly.
Totally. Yeah. Great equalizer, maybe not the best choice of words. Definitely want to get into like all the gendered aspects of that because that's a huge, huge part of the housework conversation. But yeah, in terms of universal ish, quasi universal experiences, I think most people in modern society has had to deal with having to clean their house, clean shit up, do laundry, tidy up, scrub the bathroom, do that kind of stuff. But yeah, totally. Great equalizer, probably not. There's definitely a lot of unequal distribution. I just wanted to start with that baseline sort of experiential level of like, fuck. Shit's dirty. I gotta clean it up.
I'm looking around my house right now and I see all this housework around me. You know, a pile of things over here, a piece of computer hardware that needs to be donated. Some sort of envelope has opened, spilling pieces of paper on the ground in my closet, which is ajar. There's a lot of housework around here for me.
Yeah, I've been kind of sick, so it's piled up a little bit more. I usually keep things fairly tidy, but I definitely got like crap strewn about. It's a little bit more buildup of dust and whatnot on this stuff than there usually is.
Dusting's kind of fun. Dusting's kind of a fun one. When it gets to the point where it really needs a dust, where it's like kind of gross, then it's like popping a zit to watch it go away. But
I hate how fast I can dust one day and then like even later that day be like, oh, it's already there again. There's like a bit of a dusting on it. It's so soon. I find it demoralizing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way about pretty much all chores, is how soon you have to do it again is super demoralizing.
Yeah, that's true. But like, at least if I do laundry and I got all my laundry done, then by the end of the day, there's like max one set of clothes that are now dirty. It's not that like everything's already a little dirty again. Or like if I scrub my shower and get that kind of soap scum, whatever, off the tiles and off the tub, I know that it's at least going to be like a few weeks before I even notice that it's starting to build up again. I'm not going to notice it the same day for sure, but dusting, it does often feel like it's so immediate that it's disgusting.
I remember feeling when I was a kid around making the bed. I kind of get the appeal of making the bed now. I still don't do it. But when I was a kid, I was like, why are we adding more work to this whole, like, I've got my list of chores and it's like, okay, wash dishes. That makes sense. You need to have clean dishes.
Yeah, you don't want to eat food off of dirty dishes.
But making a bed? Is there ever a scenario where not having a made bed causes any issue in the world? I kind of get the appeal now, and like it's nice, or someone comes in your room, it looks nice or whatever. But it's just not very. I'm a lot more of a functional chores person. I really need to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, like that first getting into bed when it's made is like a slightly more pleasant experience than uncrumpling the blanket and getting underneath the blanket that was uncrumpled hours ago versus getting under a blanket that you're kind of moving and uncrumpling in order to get into. It's like, it's a marginally better experience, but yeah, I also don't generally make the bed. Sometimes I will.
Oh man, I think I just realized something that's going to make me want to make the bed in the future. Is part of it the dust?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about how dust gets on everything. And I was like, oh, there's all this dust in my bed. Like I just made the connection. If I'm not making my bed, I'm not protecting the surface of my bed from dust during the day.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, but then wouldn't you have to like shake the blanket off or like be careful to never flip your blanket over? I definitely flip my blanket over regularly. So I'd have to like shake it off or something in order for that to really make a difference. But yeah, that makes sense. Especially if you have like a throw that you don't use usually.
Also, I mean, you should be, washing your bedding frequently enough that surface dust shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever noticed my bed being like dusty as a problem.
But would you like?
I'm sure there's dust in the bed, but yeah,
does the dust like mix with your sweat and shit and like cake into the sheets and stuff?
Oh, probably, yeah. And then you clean it off in the I'm like defending myself into why I don't have to do this right now. But
Yeah, you don't have to. I mean, that's the
yeah,
best reason. That's the best reason I've ever heard to make your bed in my life. That there could potentially maybe be an element of dust. Like, what's dust made out of again? Part of it's like skin cells and like
microplastics.
microplastics. Yeah. And like mites, like tiny, tiny little bugs. The bugs that are so small that they're crawling on your face right now and a microscope would reveal you've got like a colony of them between your eyes. That kind of mite.
Love that.
I've got a little bit of dust around, not on my on top of my monitor here. Oh yeah, that's a decent dust. It's visible. Dragging my finger across this dust changes the visible nature of the surface. So that means
I've got so many black like my speakers are black and the frames of the monitors are black. It makes dust very, very visible. But yeah, I don't know. My general strategy on housework is that I try to do 10 minutes every day. It's part of like this little mental checklist of things that I should do every day that I have, and then I try to do all of them every day unless I have a really good excuse not to. And 10 minutes a day is basically enough, and like that counts the days where like I start something and then get going on it and clean for half an hour. But it's like most days it's like, okay, shit, I haven't done it yet, and like tidying up all the stuff that's laying around my apartment takes like maybe 5 to 6 minutes, and then I'm like, shit, okay, I still have 4 more minutes. Okay, what am I gonna do? I'll wipe off the top of the stove, that's kind of dirty. And then, I'm here, I'll wipe off all the countertops. And it's like, okay, it's been 8 minutes. Now I need something that takes 2 more minutes. What's one more thing I need to do? Oh, maybe I'll like throw this thing out. Or there's this drawer I was going to organize a little. Or I'll take this drawer and I'll like wipe the drawer out a little bit. And then, okay, that's been 12 minutes. Perfect. I'm done. That's my housework. And that's like, I mean, I live alone, 1-bedroom apartment. It's not very big. It's just me making mess in here, and that's basically enough. Sometimes I got to do a little more, but it keeps me feeling mostly on top of stuff.
Is that just for tidying, or is that like dishes, etc. too?
It's tidying, dishes, taking out the garbage. Although I'll do dishes, I'll do cleaning things in addition to this that I don't count because it's not like targeted. But like when I'm like making food, I generally just clean dishes immediately when I'm done using it. Like sometimes I'll let dishes stack up, and that might be part of the 10 minutes of cleaning if they're like sitting in the sink. But if I'm like using multiple pots and pans, or like I used a bowl to mix something up, like to mix scrambled eggs before I poured them into the pan, I'll just immediately clean that bowl while the eggs are cooking. And that isn't part of the 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah, that's, I think that is one of like the best tips around housework that I ever got, was just do a small amount, and then often it will, once you get into the groove, do 5 minutes of dishes, and then once you've done 5 minutes, you'll be like, well, might as well make it 12 minutes and finish or whatever. Getting in the door with a small amount of chore doing is something that's been really beneficial. And then also another thing that has helped me psychologically grasp with navigating like the housework environment is chaining, kind of complementary with that one, but contradictory also in a way. Like chaining different types of housework together is something that I found useful. Like if I do the dishes and I feel good about it and I have that like hit of dopamine, I can like ride that hit into being like, oh, might as well take out the garbage too. And then I take out the garbage, and it's like I'm Tony Hawk Pro Skater putting the kickflip and the grind together, and then it feels like almost a waste of momentum to stop doing it. So yeah, I've been in the groove before like that, where I'm like, okay, now that I finish this, I should do something else too, and like ride this wave and get some stuff done. And that's something I found has been useful. But doing a small amount every day actually is something I should maybe start thinking of it consciously like that, because that sounds like it'd be useful. Like feeling like you owe 10 minutes of directed strategic household work every day is like a hack to do it more frequently. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I started doing it a couple of years ago because I was like, falling more behind on it than I used to. I was like feeling pretty burnt out a few years ago and was letting a lot of this stuff slide a lot more than I had typically been before. And the 10-minute a day thing really helped kind of kick me out of that. And yeah, that combined with just, trying to, if I see something in one room and I'm already walking to the other room and incorporating it into what I'm already doing, kind of thing. Those two things together have made it like fairly easy. I definitely don't have the cleanest place. Like if you were like a snooty person about like no dust being on things or things being very particular clean, like I think my place generally looks pretty tidy, but I don't think it would stand under scrutiny to like a harsh British nanny or something with a magnifying glass. But it's good enough for me. One benefit of living alone is that you don't have, like, I have to do it and nobody else is going to do it. And I'm also the only standard bearer whom I have to please by doing it. So it kind of simplifies a lot of the conflict around housework that can arise in co-living situations, either roommates or partners. When I had roommates in the past, it was definitely a way more touchy subject because then there's like all this stuff of like, oh, you made more of a mess than I did. I don't want to clean up your thing, or I do this more often than you and you never do this, but I always do that. Or it just becomes this thing where like hurt feelings or people's unawareness of certain issues and other people's hyper awareness and can all generate various kinds of conflict, and you have to do a lot of planning and co-deciding on what and how to do things.
Another piece of advice around cleaning that I found helpful, like sometimes my computer desk in the area around where I work will like turn into it will turn into like a gross ADHD nest with like piles of paper and empty cans and dishes from the last 6 days and like piles of stuff all around because for whatever reason, I feel comfortable in that environment. But my threshold for changing that, unless I'm like reminded of it, I have someone coming to visit, stuff like that, it's higher than most people's would be for like my immediate personal garbage nest. And if you're like that, one tip that I found was useful for me is, I can't remember the exact way it was worded to me, but the concept is garbage first, then dishes, then laundry, then clutter and organization. When you have like a big pile of a bunch of different cleaning to do, that is like the order of intensity. You know, garbage and dishes are gross. They need to be dealt with immediately. Laundry can also sometimes be gross, but it's less gross. And then everything else is after that.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It also, rings true to I don't have a super high tolerance for that, especially garbage and dishes. Like I never leave garbage or dishes out for more than, like if I'm standing and walking from one room to another, dishes, garbage, like I'll just always do that immediately. That's like not even part of cleaning really. It's just like I don't even think about it. It just has to happen because it's like gross to look at a piece of garbage laying around somewhere. I'm like, no, it just immediately goes in the garbage. And the same with dishes. It's more like laundry and clutter and like wiping surfaces and things like that are the things I have to remind myself to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways people get in that situation. Maybe if you're feeling depressed after a breakup and you're more inactive, or you've been sick, or maybe you're like me and sometimes you just like really get in the zone and you get really focused on, you're like a hunter on the hunt. You're writing and reading for days at a time or whatever, and the garbage is piling up around you and you're putting a dish on top of a banana peel on top of another dish, etc. No shame. There's no moral failure there. I'm not ashamed to admit that my desk sometimes goes like that when I'm zoning, when I'm doing something important. And by the way, everything is important. Don't feel bad if you feel like you didn't do something important. Sometimes it's just important to just scroll on the internet or whatever you're doing. But yeah, for me, the kind of imperative of like oh, just remember to do it immediately. It's never fully worked out for me. Although I have done it before for periods of time of different things, especially where like the place which is most under my own control is most prone to like turning into a nest of dishes if I'm not careful. Like the less prying eyes, the more that I'm just me doing my thing.
Right.
Like there's some batteries on my desk here. These are definitely dead batteries, but I don't remember what they came from or when that would have been. Probably months.
Yeah, I think the like just do it all the time thing is like it's great for me because I don't have to like make myself do that on the things that I am able to do it on. It just naturally happens. But like I don't think there's anything you can like consciously remember to make yourself always do all the time. Maybe you can like ingrain that new habit in yourself if you set your mind to it for like year or something and really, but yeah, it's kind of just a fortunate thing that that it happens to me. Yeah, and I've definitely had those mental health moments where, like I was saying, feeling pretty burnt out and just letting things slide a lot more than normal. And yeah, sometimes like, yeah, I think it's important to not make it worse on yourself by like turning yourself into some monster or villain for not doing that or feeling all this excessive shame for not being that kind of person or not being on top of things all the time. Cause it's like, not going to help anything. But it is, yeah, it's one of those weird cycle things too, where I feel like sometimes you legitimately can't get started. Like you're feeling depressed or your ADD is distracting you or you're hyper focused on something else. And like you just legitimately can't get into the cleaning groove. Mental health can have a real effect on like your amount of housework that you can do. But when you are able to do the housework, it can also be like kind of like circular loop thing where it can have a positive effect on your mental health to be in a clean environment or a more tidy, ordered environment. I feel like I can approach the things that I want to do more easily when I'm not surrounded by all these things that kind of jump out at me like, oh, you should throw out that banana peel, or you should like put the batteries in the place where you store old batteries, or you should do this thing or that thing. Like I end up feeling kind of bogged down and distracted by it. Even sometimes I'll just go to the bathroom and be like, oh, there's dusty little hairs and on the floor in the corner. And then it feels like there's this lurking thing that I need to deal with. And then any other thing that I'm doing is kind of like, I should really do this other thing first. So like, yeah, when I feel on top of housework stuff, I feel more capable of doing the other things that I want to do.
That reminds me, I fell out of the habit on this, but it worked really well for me for a while. Is I had a rule for myself, like a mental rule, that anytime I went into the washroom, I would leave it cleaner than I found it. And something about that amused me, I guess because bathrooms are dirty, like shit and piss are dirty. It's like this, you're going to shit in the toilet, so you're making it dirtier in a way. But like, yeah, either, scrubbing the toilet, wiping the outside of the toilet, wiping down the counter, that kind of stuff. I would just do it every time I entered the bathroom for any reason. So I just like add it to my routine of washing my hands and leaving the bathroom and so on. And yeah, it worked really well for a while, and I kind of forgot to keep doing it or whatever at some point.
Yeah, I got
distracted. That's another little hack to try. Our dear friends listening who are looking for incredible hacks from us on how to clean your house.
Yeah, all those people out there hungry for housework and hacks and tips and it's so funny when I see videos sometimes, even if it's like the stupidest thing, it's like, oh, you tie a rubber band around this thing and then you can sweep twice as many things at once. I don't know. I don't have a real example in my mind, but there's something in my brain that just is like, oh shit, is this going to be the thing that like saves me so much time on housework? I'm like, every time I scroll past one of those videos on the feed, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta stop and watch this. Is this gonna be useful to me? Is this gonna give me back my time? Is this gonna relieve me from this constant cyclical burden of housework, of cleaning? And It never does.
Yeah, it's like go stand in the corner and press up, down, B, A, and L and R at the same time, and you unlock like permanently clean house hack.
God mode, yeah. House clean mode, perfect.
Welcome back to the Clean Brothers Hack Stacking Cleantopia Tips and Tricks.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Now I know all you out there feel like absolute pieces of shit for how poorly you're keeping your house clean. And we know it's true. Just admit it. You're shit. But you can improve. You can be better with a few simple hacks, a few tips and tricks.
Oh, someone's coming over to my house. Time to quickly clean so no one sees how I live.
Oh, disgusting. Really? You didn't have that clean already? You shit. You're shit.
At a certain point, we all have to look in the mirror and admit that we're not good enough. Not good enough without hacks.
Here's a great, wonderful, amazing hack that will save you so much time you won't even believe it. Get a little dish of water, and then, here's the key, put a lemon wedge in that dish. Then put the dish in the microwave and turn it on for 30 seconds. Then, just wipe the inside of that microwave down. Fresh, lemony, clean, perfect, easy, simple hack.
I used to spend hours cleaning my microwave, but now what I do is I put in the lemon wedge and the water, I turn to another chore, hack stacking, wiping down a counter, I go back to it, and I effortlessly wipe down all of the insides. I have the whole wipe done in one movement that takes only 3.25 seconds if you practice. The entire process is taking 33.25 seconds, and I've also wiped the counter.
Bing, bang, boom, you're no longer a piece of shit.
What we might do after that, for example, is you find a hack that has 33 seconds of another timer, and then you embed that last hack in that next hack. That's what we're calling hack stacking. And eventually, the theory goes that through hack stacking, we can get all the work done that makes us not a huge piece of shit and a waste of and a total burden. We get all of that time squished down to eventually 1 second. So, our second hack of the day.
One of my favorite cleaning hacks that, especially since this show has really taken off and we've been raking in the dough, has really, really helped me a lot. Hiring other people to do it for you. Now, this hack is one of the biggest time savers that I've ever encountered in terms of all houseworking hacks. Being able to kick back while someone else does it all and you don't do anything really makes me feel productive and worthy of love and basic human decency.
Yeah, that method, for those who can afford it, is unparalleled. It's auto magic. And to that end, this is one of the greatest housing hacks of all time, and I'm thrilled to share it with everyone today. It was sent in to us
so good
by a fan. They shared this housing hack with us, and it's a must try. So what he did, we're all hackers on this show, and everyone who watches is hackers. So he was trying to figure out a good housing hack, and so he hacked into the federal government budget office and reallocated resources to automatically have his house cleaned by a legion of professional federal cleaners. So they all get on their buses from the Capitol building. All the cleaners, they bring their mops and buckets, and they go down to that man's house and they clean it out of that budget. And so he just pulled that off as a hack of the federal budget. Give that a try.
Yeah, and I'm happy to report that man went from being a totally worthless pile of garbage to being, honestly, a wonderful, productive member of society that we can all respect. Just with that one simple trick.
Yeah, no, we visited his house and I checked on top of the picture frames. Mm-hmm. Not a speck, not a mote of dust. Absolutely no dust. And I asked, how'd you do this? And he said, I hacked the federal government budget office.
Brilliant. Genius. That is the hack stacker way of thinking, way of life. Love it. I love to hear it. You love to hear it, you love to see it, and you love to imagine it.
Yeah, and when we visited, I'd say you smell it as well because he uses a lemon-scented cleaner. And our final hack of the show tonight. Now, this is par excellence. This is something that we've kept behind the Hack Stacker paywall for years, but we're ready to now share it with everyone.
We were thinking, should we not share it? Is this too much of a good hack, too wonderful to release to the public? But we said, no, you know what? Our audience, they need to know.
Yeah, This is a top cleaning hack. And when you stack it,
Ooh, the stack?
Cleantopia.
Absolutely.
So the hack is that you act kind of like huffy about all the work that you have to do. Like, oh, I'm being nagged, when someone reminds you of what you've agreed to do. You make a big show of the work that you do. You're like, oh, I'm doing it. Hey, look at me. That kind of thing. But then you just do about half of what you should do. It has to be picked up by other people around you some way or another. It's actually, you can cut the amount of work you do by half.
It's a way to make your workload more manageable while at the same time presenting to the world as if you're doing quite a lot of stuff. And that means that socially you're not seen as a piece of shit, but you're also doing less stuff. And so that's great. I've been using this one since I was a kid.
And that was the Clean Brothers Hack Stacking Cleantopia Tips and Tricks. You got a hack you want to share with the Clean Brothers? Log on to the Tips and Tricks Cleantopia line and share your hack stack and get tickets to be members of our live studio audience. Now back to our show. One thing that they emphasize in this book that I read, which is How to Keep House While Drowning, which is a book that's like written for people who like really struggle with cleaning their house. It's got kind of like a social justice-y lens. One of the things that they emphasize in that book a bunch of times is that like not cleaning your house isn't a moral failing, or like struggling to do your chores isn't a moral failing, and that shame. I've met some people before who have some like real serious trouble with cleaning. And honestly, I'm somewhere on that spectrum between being able to clean enough and struggling with cleaning. So I found the book helpful in some ways. But yeah, I think it's an important point just to underline that if you struggle with cleaning your house, it's not a moral issue. Like, we have to be responsible for how it affects other people and also even how it affects ourselves. But starting from a place of like, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't easily clean because of my depression or my ADHD or whatever, or because of my nothing diagnosed, but just I can't do it. It's not a moral failing. It's important, I think, to plant that flag. I think it's not.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that gets like caught up under people like judge themselves or others as lazy or useless or that kind of thing. And like, that's not a good way to think about it. It's not how people operate. If you're unable to do something or have a really hard time doing something, there's usually a reason for that other than just like you're a terrible person or whatever negative things that negative self-talk part of your brain might try to tell you it is. I think it's definitely true.
Yeah. And I think it needs to be taken out of that kind of like, I'm in trouble with teacher or I'm in trouble with mom and dad kind of mindset of like, if I don't do this, they're going to make me sorry, or like rebellion against that and stuff, and try to get into like the framework of a relationship that you have with yourself in your own environment and strategize in that context. Actually, like, honestly, if you could have hacks for real life, like universe modifying hacks, it would be such a great buff to like never have to do any housework.
Oh yeah.
On human life.
Right.
Human life with housework removed. All the your places will always be made clean somehow. The dust never piles up.
Way back in the Zeitgeist days, one of the things that Jacques Fresco from the Venus Project would always talk about is that homes should have a slight positive amount of air pressure, so that when you open windows or doors or anything, the air is just always slightly blowing out so that dust doesn't get in, and then there would be no dusting. I have no idea the functional practicality of this, if it would actually work, what other issues that might cause, but it was always a little beautiful dream to imagine there being no dust because the air is just constantly slightly blowing out instead of in.
Yeah, I want to believe in that beautiful dream.
And hey, technology has legitimately reduced a lot of housework over time. Like, washing machines is a huge one. Imagine if you had to wash all your clothes by hand all the time. Nightmare. Absolute nightmare. Like, I have so many clothes that, every day you make dirty clothes and then you have to like move them around in the soap and wring them out and like hang them up, and it's an enormous job washing clothes by hand, and you just like don't have to do it anymore. It's pretty amazing. I want to believe in the liberatory potential of home appliances. I think sometimes it's overplayed and there's like a lot of crap that gets made that doesn't actually help as much as it says that it will. But when you get a hit, when you get like a washing machine, something that really, really does great work, it's a big hit.
Yeah, I want to believe in and I do believe to a certain degree in the liberatory potential of technology. A socially oriented development of technology can be a liberatory thing. Using a dishwasher is much preferable to me to washing dishes by hand. It is just a much better experience. And I think we probably could. I like the idea of the vacuuming, self-vacuuming house that Jack Fresco's talking about there and that kind of stuff. There is something that came to mind. I haven't actually read it yet, but there is this book that I've been meaning to read, which is it's kind of a partial critique of automation and that techno-optimism. It's called More Work for Mother by Ruth Schwartz. It came out in the 1980s. But my understanding of the argument of the book is that in the history of housework, a lot of the things that became automated actually didn't end up saving mothers in households' work, because at the same time that dishwashers and washing machines and so on became normalized, responsibilities that were done previously by children or by men moved onto the plate of women in general in American society. So I haven't read this book, but I understand that there is a feminist critique of the premise of like automation in the household being this unalloyed good unless it's paired with a challenging of gender dynamics and the exploitation of women's labor in the household. But that being said, technology can really be a beautiful and elegant thing when it's socially designed based on human need. So the prospect of further automations of housework in the future as a liberatory horizon, I totally agree with that. Although, maybe I read this book and I change my mind, but I don't think it's really making the argument that there's nothing to that, only that the gender dynamics in particular of the last 100 years, 120 years or whatever.
Yeah, it's like automation in the workplace too. Instead of being used to liberate workers and get more free time for them, it's used to pare down the workforce, force people into these roles of doing small, repetitive movements over and over again. It's not that a washing machine doesn't make cleaning clothes easier and take less time, and it's not like a truly labor-saving device. It's that the way it ends up getting implemented in patriarchal norms around housework is that, maybe in the past, washing clothes was so much work that everybody had to help out. And then now it's like, oh yeah, you can just do the laundry in between all the other things that you're supposed to be doing, right, housewife? Like, without the political lens of feminism and like equal participation in housework by all the people who are benefiting from the housework, all of these things can be a double-edged sword depending on how they're used and like who the benefits are allowed to accrue to. And you're saving time no longer washing clothes so much, but if that time is then demanded of you to be doing some other thing, then the benefits of that are going to whoever's making that demand of you, not you saving the time.
Yeah, we'll have to do an episode around some of the automation debates because it's really interesting. Like, it is liberatory in a sense, but then in situations like you're describing in the workplace or in the household, where hierarchical systems of command and control and of greater and lesser and so on steal that liberatory potential from us in a way.
We now go to a job interview.
Hi, thank you so much for coming in. Yeah, can you close the door behind you?
Thank you so much for seeing me.
So we got your interview. We think that you look great for the job.
Perfect.
Maybe I'll just bring you some of the duties and you can let me know if it sounds like something you can tackle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to have a few things that are every day. That includes making the bed, preparing meals. The meals need to be bought at an earlier date and planned ahead. You need to have that ready.
Okay, yeah. Plan ahead groceries. Yeah.
And that's every day. And the dishes from that are going to have to be washed, let's just say every day.
dishes.
You're not going to want to go much more than daily on that.
Sure, yeah.
For cleaning, we recommend doing it every day, just a little bit here and there. Otherwise, it really does start to stack up. You could say that cleaning comes down to maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 different weekly things that you could figure out just to make it simple. It's less of a headache for you, honestly. Make that every day.
Cleaning every day. And what exactly do I clean? Like floors, walls, bathroom, living room, carpets?
Bathroom, living room, these are going to be some of the most important areas to clean. Dusting the bedroom is important. And then obviously
so all of those things that I said. Okay, all of those. Okay,
yeah,
all right.
The hallways, the front entrance will sometimes have mud coming in. And you have to just kind of keep an eye out. Just keep a tab open, I guess. And the hours are at all times.
Okay.
So the cleaning, there's also the laundry. The laundry is going to have to be done once or twice a week, depending on...
Okay, laundry. I'll write that down.
Oh, and sorry, just on dusting, dust will accumulate. So you're going to want to dust this fairly regularly. Just to make it simple, make that every day. And the organizational, so stuff is going to be left out on the counters, sometimes by you, sometimes by other people. And that needs to be organized every day.
Right. So it's my responsibility. Okay, yeah, that's a lot. I like to keep busy.
You have to keep track of and pay all of the bills.
Oh, okay, I'll just write that down too. Sorry, yeah.
So in order to do that, you're going to need another job, probably 40 hours a week.
Right. Well, how much does, pardon me for asking, but how much does this job pay with all these responsibilities?
Yeah, it pays $0.
Like during the training period or?
No, for your whole life. It pays $0 forever.
Oh, okay. That's not what I was expecting. That's a lot of work for no money. I guess I'll have to get back to you on this. I don't know. It doesn't sound that good, to be honest, but I'll just have to think about it.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'll just say one thing that sometimes people will do is they'll find someone to live with who is more focused on these kind of things. They'll sort of subtly coerce them into doing it in a arguably exploitative way, although often unintentionally, just by delaying when they do it. And then they can kind of be like, what? Oh, I was busy. Sorry, why didn't you tell me? Or, oh, if you care so much, why don't you just do it? That kind of stuff. So that's one strategy that people use to cope with that.
Interesting. I appreciate that. That sounds interesting for sure.
Well, I'm here to help.
Yeah, and you've been so helpful explaining this all to me. Thank you.
And that was a job interview.
Seriously Wrong is an independent, listener-supported, utopian podcast. And we rely on the generous donations of listeners like you to keep on going. So if you like the show and want to support what we do, head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/seriouslywrong and sign on up for just $6 a month. That's all we ask is that sweet 6 to keep the lights on and those podcast machines chugging along.
We turn down offers from advertisers all the time because our listeners are awesome and they're generous in supporting the show, and advertising is a form of mind poison. And that Sweet 6 will also get you access to our bonus episodes, a Discord server. We run a listener book club and reading group.
Yeah, and there's some great stuff there in the bonus episodes. We've got a whole series going over Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, and there's some wild stuff in that book. We have deep dives into historical topics like the Haitian Revolution, in-depth analysis and sketch world recreations of all 3 Atlas Shrugged movies. We have an episode going over the CIA's simple sabotage manual from the Second World War that is, frankly very illuminating. And Wrong Wars, our new comedy audio drama series.
And you also get our episodes before anyone else. Your contribution will help keep Seriously Wrong going for 1,000 episodes.
After 1,000 episodes, I don't want to make any promises, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll just make the promise that if we hit 1,000 episodes, there will be 10,000 years of world peace.
That's just objectively factual. That's like talking to a doctor. Like, that's what a high level of epistemology we're dealing with.
And that's a promise. That's a guarantee.
So one of the things that I was reading about and prep for this episode is the wages for housework movement in the 1970s. There was this second wave feminist movement that had some publications. They had like kind of a Feminist International meeting and talking around wages for housework issues from like 72 to 77. It's really interesting. But basically, like, their goal was to put forward the idea that housework was labor, it was real work. And they also wanted to advance a kind of Marxist feminist view of the exploitation of women. So there was a lot of debates and discussions going on in the 1970s. Actually, there's this great book called Wages for Housework, A History of an International Feminist Movement, 1972 to 77 by Louise Toupon. And this book contained a description of women's status in the early 1970s, the conditions that gave rise to this movement. And it's very evocative, so I just want to share this. Women earned half of what men did. If they complained about that, they were likely to be fired. Rape was a criminal offense unless it was the rape of a wife. However, unlike other criminal offenses, rape victims were presumed guilty and had to prove innocence. In the 1970s, the Canadian Criminal Code treated prostitution as a, quote, crime of status. People were prosecuted for what they are and not what they did. So you wouldn't be criminalized. This is me breaking from the text to explain. You wouldn't be criminalized for engaging in prostitution. You'd be criminalized for, quote unquote, being a prostitute. So because of that, women, and this is back to the text, women suspected of prostitution had to explain their presence anywhere to police on command. And in Canada, Indigenous women lost their rights and status as Indigenous people if they married a non-Indigenous man. In the early 1970s, this is mentioned in an earlier episode we did, there wasn't a term for like sexual harassment yet. Sexual harassment had to be proven as a form of discrimination through the court system in the 1970s. And before the term sexual harassment was popularized, people didn't have a language to talk about that other than like, you know, being shitty or like making me feel uncomfortable, etc. So in this context, the Wages for Housework movement puts forward this political perspective that, number one, women in households are doing unpaid work that is real work. Number two, that women are exploited by men and patriarchal society to be forced and conditioned to do all of this work, which is treated as invisible and not worthy. And thirdly, that this dynamic is not outside of capitalism, but is actually foundational to the way that capitalism exploits workers in general, i.e. the bosses benefit by being able to pay the husbands who work for them lower wages because all of this unpaid work is being done in the house. So their argument was that patriarchal society doesn't just discriminate against women, as being argued in the public sphere, but exploits women. And that this isn't just something that husbands do to their wives, but it's something that capitalism does to women in general through the household and for the benefit of the rich. So wages for housework isn't just a demand that people would get wages for housework. It's a theoretical perspective. It's a political concept that embodies all of this, and so therefore extends also into other critiques of things like domestic violence and critiques of the exploitation of women elsewhere and the exploitation of third world women by first world women through like wealthy families, including wealthy women hiring domestic help, which are people who are usually from foreign countries who are underpaid for the value of their work. Or in the case of the United States, a lot of the history in the United States is that Black women were taking care of white children through employment relationships, and before that, slave relationships. So wages for housework is partially the idea that, yes, people who do household labor should literally be paid, but it's also a broader perspective, a political perspective about the nature of work in the household.
Yeah, it's really strange to be someone who's arguing for capitalism. And like one of the things they say is like, oh, you do work, productive work that benefits society, you get paid, you can take that money that you're paid and then buy things in the economy and purchase whatever, you know, like general market ideology is that there's this give and take of like work. When work is done, you get paid for work. And because you're paid for work, you can purchase things, you can do things in the economy. But like all of that has to rely on this idea that like somehow housework doesn't count. And like, there's really no good reason that I can think of or that I've ever seen anyone explain as to why it doesn't count. The only reason that I think makes any sense at all is that, first of all, it's hard to like account for it in the same way because you're not at a workplace. There's no boss with a stopwatch making sure that you're working hard the whole time, monitoring when you are and aren't working. So there's like a functional difficulty with it, which is where I think most people just sort of turn their brains off and would be like, well, of course you don't get paid for housework. That's at home. But like, if no housework happened, then all the other work that's done under capitalism starts to fall apart because it's like it's the necessary buttress beneath it all. It's like this vast pool of completely unacknowledged, unpaid, taken for granted labor that holds up the whole system. And if you want to pay people for doing things that are productive for society, there's really no solid reason for not including housework in that. It doesn't really make any sense. Like, you can be like, oh, it only benefits one person, but like, why does that matter? If you're a nanny for a family, you're only benefiting that one family with your work, but they pay you for it. So why, like, housework in that context counts, but when you're doing it for your own family, it doesn't count. It's truly a bizarre sort of double standard that like you can only make sense of it in terms of trying to benefit bosses and devaluing women and things associated with women, women's work, things that women are doing don't count, don't matter, or like it's just expected of them to do it for free and be happy about it.
Yeah, I guess the argument against it in a practical sense is that all wages come from either the fruits of profits or the fruits of taxation. And if you attribute value to women's labor, it's some crazy amount of money. There's this New York Times article. If American women earned minimum wage for unpaid work they do around the house, they would have made $1.5 trillion last year. So yeah, $1.5 trillion is like a lot of money. I don't know what the total spending of the United States is. It's 10 trillion. Is it 10 trillion? So yes, so far according to fiscaldata.treasury.gov in the United States, there's been $6.2 trillion spent by the United States government so far. And I believe that is just federal spending. So compensating all American women for the housework they do at minimum wage actually is within the budgetary potential of the United States. It would involve making some cuts elsewhere or increasing taxes. But I guess that's the argument, is there's no profit in it, so the money doesn't come from there.
Well,
so the only other place that wages come from is...
There's no profit in it, kind of, but like only if you like stop the chain of reasoning at an arbitrary point. Like, all the profit that every business in the world makes is dependent on housework happening first. Like, in a kind of like, you could say there's no profit in a lot of things that businesses rely on if you just like arbitrarily decide that nobody should be paid for those things and they just have to happen. Like, it's kind of true that there's no profit in it, but that's a choice. That's an arbitrary choice that's being made on the analytical level to not count that labor that is necessary for McDonald's to function, Walmart to function, Amazon to function, all of these places.
You're absolutely correct. I was totally neglecting to reflect the analysis of our feminist sisters who pointed out rightly that the profits of housework are being robbed from all of us by the same robber barons who rob us of everything. The wealthy and powerful, the big firms and corporations. But really, it doesn't generate profit directly. Like, I clean my house and then money comes from somewhere to give to me or something. I think right. You're right, but you're right in the sense that we could account for where these trillions of dollars are. But also, yeah, it would need to be paid by taxation, right? Or it would need to be paid for by government spending.
Sure.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe MMT.
Yeah, I think taxes is like the only conceivable way to really make it happen. I did see one
suggestion, and this was like an older text, that husbands would actually pay their wives to do housework. And then this would force employers to increase the pay to husbands so that they could afford to pay their wives to do housework. But in the modern times when most husbands and wives are both working, it doesn't really work in the same way. But yeah, like there are times in society where people are paid to do things like just like a nanny or whatever that don't quote unquote generate profit. Like if someone decides to pay someone else for a service, it's not necessarily that they generate a profit. But yeah, in general, I agree that it would have to be through taxation. And yeah, my general point was just that it's arbitrary. Like, you know, we pay garbage men, we pay people who participate in sewer upkeep, we pay people who sweep the streets. Like every year when the leaves start falling, they like drive those big trucks to sweep all the leaves up off the road. And that's a type of cleaning that is paid for by society. And there is a benefit to society in general for people to keep their houses well maintained and cleaned and upkept. And, you know, even just from the point of view of like society-wide resource management, it's better for everybody in general if things aren't allowed to fall into disrepair, and then we don't have to use more resources to repair them or rebuild them or do it again. And like, yeah, your house is your house now, but it will eventually likely be somebody else's house, as houses tend to outlive humans a lot of the time. The upkeep of things in general is a general social benefit. So I don't feel like housework is that different from a lot of the things that we do use taxes to pay people for.
So yeah, there were some models for wages for housework that were proposed by different people. Actually, although the wages for housework movement from the 1970s, this was something that was floating around feminist rhetorical, like there was this book written by Eleanor Rathbone, who later became elected to British Parliament. She wrote a book called The Disinherited Family in 1924, which supported this idea of family allowances for mothers based on the amount of their children, something that still exists in the UK today, I think. So that's along the lines of the rhetoric, the rationale behind this was in part that, you know, mothers of families are doing labor that should be reinforced and paid by the state. In the 1970s, there was a few different proposals for just, you know, actually paying people for housework. There was nothing that involved any sort of like surveillance or like clocking in, clocking out amount of hours kind of pay or whatever. But the National Council on Welfare, which was an independent agency that advised the Canadian government on welfare, suggested in a 1972 report that housewives should be paid. The book I was reading, I mentioned before, Wages for Housework, also mentions that a handful of authors in 1973 proposed this idea of home educators, which are people who would get money for child rearing, full-time wage until the kid was 6 and half-time wage after 6, and it could go to either parent. So there's like different models of how this could be approached, but generally it's like a lump sum transfer of money. It could be gender neutral. It's frequently in practice tied to like kids and child rearing. But the wages for housework movement was putting a broader sense of housework. Their argument was that, you know, women were conditioned and more or less forced to do a variety of different types of work. There's even people who weren't in relationships or didn't have children were also conditioned by this exploitative patriarchal system that had women insidiously feeling compelled to pick up this invisible work, even in public.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. It's like it's a really effective way of extracting unpaid labor from people, is to create this sort of like implicit assumption that you will do it, and that sometimes it's even like, oh, women like doing it. They just like cleaning things more than men do, or it's just sort of naturally, they just tend to do it. I don't even notice half the time. They just like start doing it, and you know, it doesn't even come up in my head. Yeah, a lot of these like subtle social patriarchal norms where you're not even necessarily thinking like, oh, like women should, or this is women's work. It's just like expecting it or not noticing when it is done. Or like, I don't know, you're better at that than I am. You should just do it. You're so good. You're so good at dusting. Whenever I dust, it's like dusty again immediately. But when you dust, it's like it's so much better. And now it's time for a reading of Notice to All Governments, written by Judy Quinlan of Toronto Wages for Housework, and was distributed as a flyer during a street celebration for the opening of the campaign office of the New York Wages for Housework Committee in 1975.
The women of the world are serving notice. We clean your homes and factories. We raise the next generation of workers for you. Whatever else we may do, we are the housewives of the world. In return for our work, you have only asked us to work harder.
We are serving notice to you that we intend to be paid for the work we do. We want wages for every dirty toilet, every painful childbirth, every indecent assault, every cup of coffee, and every smile. And if we don't get what we want, then we will simply refuse to work any longer.
We have brought our children to be good citizens and to respect your laws, and you have put them in factories and prisons and ghettos and in typing pools. Our children deserve more than you can offer, and now we will bring them up to expect more.
We have borne babies for you when you needed more workers, and we have submitted to sterilization when you didn't. Our wombs are not government property any longer.
We have scrubbed and polished and oiled and waxed and scoured until our arms and backs ached. And now you've only created more dirt. Now you will rot in your own garbage.
We have worked in the isolation of our homes when you needed us to, and we have taken on a second job too when you needed that. Now we want to decide when we work, how we work, and who we work for. We want to be able to decide not to work at all, like you.
We are teachers and nurses and secretaries and prostitutes and actresses and childcare workers and hostesses and waitresses and cooks and cleaning ladies and workers of every variety. We have sweated while you have grown rich. Now we want the wealth we have produced. We want it in cash, retroactive, and immediately. And we want all of it. And on the back of the pamphlet here it says, Housework, unpaid work, the crime against women internationally.
Yeah. It's great. I love we want it in cash, retroactive and immediately, and we want all of it. We want back the wealth that we've produced. It's so true.
Yeah, it's also wages for housework. Not only like does it tie to, the gendered exploitation of women structurally in society, but it also it's a great universal demand because like you were saying before, housework is kind of a universal thing in that unless we have someone to do it for us, there's a certain amount that needs to be done, like picking out even stuff like picking out groceries, clothes, cooking for yourself, etc. Either that's done collectively, that's done for someone else, that's done for money, or you do it yourself, but it has to be done in some way. So there is that universality to it that a sufficient wages for housework campaign could not just rectify past injustice around gender, it can also be a universalist program because housework is universal.
Yeah, everybody needs housework done or creates housework through their existence. So it's a universal thing that doesn't always fall equally on every member of society, and that there's social norms that place the burden on women more often than men. But I don't know anybody personally who has never had to do housework. It's a kind of thing that I think everybody can relate to on some level or another of yeah, it does suck that I have to do all this shit and you don't get any points for it in this society that's completely run on points.
On the back of the leaflet here, the other side, there's this little drawing of a sign that says, we have sacrificed enough of our lives. There's a certain heaviness to this when you think about it, especially in a historic context. The moral argument here is so profound and timeless.
Yeah, as much as housework sucks in a universal way for everyone who has to do it, thinking about the position of women in the 1970s and before that, basically limited in this role of being housewife, like an unpaid servant to your husband, who didn't even just have to do all of her housework, but all of his housework and he gets all the money and like the ability to interact in society and make decisions, and like the rage and indignity of it all like really comes through in this piece. And I thought it was a really powerful piece of writing.
One of the quotes that stuck out for me from the Wages for Housework book that I was reading, this comes from a feminist collective in the 70s called Collectif L'Insoumise. They said that wages for housework was a way to avenge the fate of our mothers, to return dignity to the labor of the past, present, and future of generations of mothers and grandmothers, which I thought was a really moving. It's like that Stephen Jay Gould quote about Einstein's brain. Like, I don't care how much Einstein's brain weighed. What I care about is that there's brains equal to his, toiling in fields and sweatshops. Just the thought of like generations of people who were placed so rigidly in a role of housekeepers and had their potentiality abridged by a repressed system, and that those people are our mothers and grandmothers and our great aunts, and that like this idea of valuing and working through what it takes to value housework and to value the domestic sphere and the labor that reproduces everyday life as a way of avenging our own families really resonated with me. Yeah, I think there's a certain analytical and theoretical and rhetorical and organizational, there's really something here. Like, there's something that is immensely relevant to the present. And despite like a strong focus on the liberation of women from patriarchal society, there's like this universalist current to it. I feel like there's really, like, this is a political fight that should come back. Like, there's a great utopian current here, and there's like large structural implications for it. I think it's like, there's something really good about this. Today on Confirmation Bias News, the day Iceland's women went on strike from BBC News and Jacobin.
On October 24th, 1975, over 90% of Icelandic women refused to work. The aim? To show how much society depended on women's labor, from farms and factories to the home.
In what was called the Women's Day Off action, they successfully brought the economy to a standstill, forcing Iceland to recognize how much it depended on women's labor. The massive turnout also ushered in an era of heightened political participation among women, which contributed substantially to Iceland's international reputation as a frontrunner in gender equality.
Banks, factories, and even some shops had to close, as did many schools and nurseries, leaving many fathers with no choice but to take their children to work.
We heard children playing in the background while the newsreaders read the news on the radio. It was a great thing to listen to, knowing that men had to take care of everything, said Vigdis Finnbogadóttir, president of Iceland and Europe's first female president. There was a tremendous power in it all, and a great feeling of solidarity and strength.
The idea of the strike was first proposed by the Red Stockings, a radical women's movement founded in 1970. But to some Icelandic women, it felt too confrontational. When the strike was renamed Women's Day Off, it secured near universal support, including solid backing from the unions.
The Red Stockings, however, were ambivalent about the outcome of the strike. The Red Stockings had wanted to galvanize working-class women to take political action and create a feminist movement rooted in the lower rungs of the social hierarchy. Instead, as they saw it, the change of label from Women's Strike to Women's Day Off had undermined the event's political momentum.
In 1978, the Equality page of an Icelandic social democratic newspaper interviewed 3 women from the Red Stockings movement. One said, quote, "In reality, the Women's Day was unfocused, feeble, and really just a show. Still, women realized that they were a force, that they were many, and that they were strong. They realized that they could stand in solidarity with one another."
It was perhaps this sense of solidarity that soon led to a significant increase in women's political participation in Iceland. In 1980, Iceland became the first nation to democratically elect a female president. In 1982, a group of women that included the Red Stockings decided to put together a women-only ballot for the Reykjavik municipal elections. A year later, some of those women established a new political party named Women's Alliance. These two parties had considerable effect on Icelandic politics, bringing issues usually considered private, such as gender-based violence, into the political arena, and they also fought for daycare, longer parental leave, and women's shelters.
The Women's Day Off has also left a mark on feminist movements internationally. In October 2016, Polish women went on a one-day strike to protest a bill attempting to criminalize abortion, specifically claiming to follow the tradition of Icelandic women. A few days later, women in Argentina organized a one-hour national women's strike, calling attention to violence against women. Since then, the International Women's Strike has been staged in at least 50 countries around the world.
So there you have it. In 1975, over 90% of Icelandic women refused to participate in work, leading to a cascade of social and political effects for women's liberation. Contributions from both BBC and Jacobin were used in this segment. So I was looking for positive sides of doing housework, or like having to do housework. And I found a few studies and articles claiming that doing housework is good for you. It's good for your mental health and your physical health. Housework is exercise and so on. There's a study of older adults in Hong Kong that found doing more housework was significantly associated with living longer. And they guessed that might be because it could improve physical and cognitive functioning. So that's good. That's like a good argument to do housework regularly. You think of it as like a exercise, as a way to strengthen yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. Like, I don't do a lot of focused exercise. I mean, I go for walks. That's like a type of exercise, especially when you're going uphill. But like, yeah, cleaning up around the house. Sometimes it's like the main thing I do during the day, that is getting up, getting in motion, moving around, getting down on the ground, scrubbing the floor a little bit or some of the cabinets. It just makes basic sense, yeah, that especially when you're older and like you don't have a lot of other things going on, you might not leave the house as often or whatever. Makes perfect sense that it's good for you to do a little bit of housework.
I remember there was this placebo study where they like had people who worked as maids, and they told one group of them that their work was good exercise. Their job will burn calories and be good for them, etc. And the group that was told that, they actually lost weight over this like time period that they were studied. And there's some dispute on whether it's fully the placebo effect or probably they changed the way that they acted when they thought of housework as exercise.
Yeah, like they were putting a little extra oomph into it when they were like, I'm doing exercise right now.
Yeah, or like maybe they started ordering more salads and stuff. Like when I think of that, I imagine feeling like your job is exercise, you're like, yeah, I'm doing part of what it takes to be healthy. So now all I need to do is add the food part to it. And like, I'm going to skip some chocolate bars and stuff because I'm on a roll with all this exercise I'm getting, something like that. But in any case, they did find that the group that was primed to think of house cleaning as exercise lost weight. It's often mentioned as like a power of the placebo effect thing.
Right. Yeah, maybe I should stop hedging as to whether I consider my walks exercise. I'll be like, no, they are exercise. It's
yeah.
I am doing exercise. I have to think of it that way.
I do. I mean, I agree with that. I think that walks are a really good form of exercise. I love walking. I love going for walks and thinking about stuff or talking on the phone. Yeah, that's totally exercise. Don't sell yourself short.
It's interesting, too, in this study about older people doing more housework having positive effects on well-being. It was interesting that it said there was a significant mediating effect on physical health, a marginally significant effect on cognitive functioning, but no mediating effect on mental health, which is not what I would have expected. And I know it's just one study, but yeah, I wonder if the mental health housework connection is more sort of unidirectional. Like if you have bad mental health, you might be less likely to do it, but it doesn't actually like help your mental health. But I mean, cognitive functioning is good, like especially when you're getting older. You want to keep that up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down for cognitive functioning without mental health if that's what
if that's what's on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, from a utopian perspective here, I think a synthesis between house cleaning, reproductive labor, and exercise, a conscious synthesis, could potentially be a utopian thing. Like perhaps, this is a stupid example, but just to open up the discussion, what if you had like a weighted mop? Then when you're mopping, you're also getting more exercise, you know? What are the
Right,
frontiers
just
in
make
this?
it harder.
People struggle to find time to clean. People struggle to find time to go to the gym. I feel like for me personally, if I can really start 2-in-1ing, if I can shampoo and conditioner that shit and just put it all in one bottle, it's the exercise and house cleaning. That might be a useful strategy for someone like me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know, I feel like I want to get mopping down first. Like mopping is one I really I don't do. I have a mop, but I pretty much only use it when I spill things. Regular mopping isn't part of my normal cleaning regimen. So when I think about adding weights to the mop, I'm like, no, first I'm going to get mopping down. And then if I got to up the difficulty level afterwards. But I mean, you know, obviously we're not just talking about me here. There could be other people who do mop all the time, and or for whom adding a weight to the mop would make them more likely to want to do it.
I was reading recently about like the intense amount of energy that's used on washing machines and dryers. And I was thinking, could you set up a spin dryer that's like using human energy? You're burning calories in order to dry your clothes. If you had like a combination of sunlight and manual spinning, there could be a real virtue in like connecting the domestic life and the exercise world. And it's kind of a lateral utopian move, but understanding that we need to sharply reduce the amount of energy and material resources that we use as a species in short order might be worth looking into that.
Yeah, like a salad spinner, you know, where you turn it a little bit, but because of the gears, it like spins really fast. You just need like a bigger version of that for clothes. Maybe a little bit of heat.
Capture some heat from the sun. That's cool. That kind of tech is cool with me. We also have a few stats on the unfair distribution of housework in heterosexual couples in particular. According to the 2010 General Social Survey, women spend around 50 hours a week caring for children, and men spend around 25 hours a week, so about half as much. British Social Attitude Survey found in 2023 that 63%, almost 2/3 of British women, report that they do more than their fair share of chores around the house. A Pew Research survey from 2023 also found that an increasing number of couples are economically egalitarian in the sense that both are breadwinners with roughly similar incomes, but that men in heterosexual partnerships are on average doing significantly less housework than women. And I found this really interesting. There's this article on The Conversation talking about the mental load of chores. We'll have all these links in the description. The mental load of chores falls disproportionately on women, and actually the gap on mental load versus the physical doing of chores is an even bigger gap.
Yeah, I also saw some research done by Rug Doctor, who I've never heard of. They're a company, but I just like the way they put this, which is that women spend an average of 12,896 hours during their lifetime cleaning the house, whereas men on average spend around 6,448 hours cleaning a house. So it's about double. And when you put it that way in like an amount of hours over a lifetime, it really does feel like a lot, like almost 13,000 hours, 6,500 hours more than men. And I mean, I guess you could be like, well, hey, it's all to women's benefit. They're getting more exercise in. They're getting more of that exercise benefit.
Yeah, actually, isn't it like women live on average like a couple years more than men, right?
Yeah, it'll help you keep you alive longer.
I wonder if they've ever tested. So we have this study from China showing that people who do a lot of chores live longer. We know that from the history of feminist analysis in particular, but just like society in general, it's an agreed and known fact that in general, women do more chores than men, do more housework than men. And we also know that from like statistics and death and birth records and stuff that women live a couple years longer than men. Has this ever been correlated before? This is actually, that's like kind of interesting.
Yeah, try and do a study that like controls for amount of housework done for older people and see whether the gap between how long men and women survive shrinks. Because, yeah, I don't know, it makes intuitive sense anyway that if doing more housework makes you live longer, women tend to live longer, especially like once you're retired. if women have been doing housework their entire life and they continue doing it after retirement age, but men are doing less housework their entire life and continue doing less after retirement age when they're also doing less other work. So it seems like a real thing to look into there.
Yeah.
Could be that men have been screwing themselves over this whole time by not picking up some of the slack there.
That would actually be so wild if that turned out to be one of the factors there. But yeah, no, that's interesting.
Another study I just found was published this year in the Archives of Women's Mental Health found that the cognitive burden that women have of doing more of the checklist, the management, the cognitive tasks of delegating, planning, anticipating household tasks is actually associated with more depression and other mental health issues.
Right.
So
burnout. Oh, yeah. And like,
it's not all
resentment.
It's not all roses for the women who have to do more of this stuff.
So maybe what we're seeing is like not the full effect of all the chores, the housework that's being done, like in the survival rate difference. Maybe we're seeing the boosts of doing that extra housework, but we're also seeing the drawbacks of the extra kind of like depression and so on. So we might be able to unlock greater longevity for all genders by achieving a reasonable balance.
It's worth a shot.
But actually, this is the most that I've felt like I want to do housework in a theoretical sphere. It's actually motivating to me to be like, doing housework is going to increase the lifespan of yourself and those around you.
I've had my moments where I really like doing it or want to do it, where you're like, let's get down to it. Let's do some spring cleaning. But if I can internalize these facts, it might be good long term for the cleanliness of my house, my apartment.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the dignity of work as it relates to housework, or like the meditative aspect or something? Like what's the positives of doing?
Yeah, I don't know. Something about the dignity of work, like I get it in an abstract sense. There's like, I think there could be something there, but I have like a mental block on that. I think I'm like, no, it's not.
Or the dignity of labor. If we say work refers to like coercive labor, the dignity of action, the dignity of participation, the dignity of, like it sounds like some weirdo right-wing shit to talk about dignity of work, like back to work legislation or something. But I think there is something to the positive self-conception that comes out of being a useful part of something and like diligently participating in what's needed, trying to steel man what is true about that.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that conceptually for sure. Feels good to have like done a thing or to have been useful. But I don't know. Yeah, for me, like motivating to do housework, I think the biggest positive motivator for me is I just like it not being super dirty, the avoidance of the negative there. But maybe I can train myself more to think about the dignity of labor or of like participating in doing something useful in the home. Abstractly, I can get on board with those, but I have a hard time like feeling that.
Yeah, I've felt the meditative practice. I used to work as a janitor for a while, and mopping floors and cleaning up dirt and wiping off windowsills and all that kind of stuff and wiping down windows. I was forced to, in order to pay my rent, come to a rhythm with it where it was a meditative, repetitive process, something that, you could do without thinking. And there is something pleasing about that meditative element to housework. But I think the most persuasive thing for me, this harebrained exercise and longevity thing combined with like a healthy sense of responsibility to the people around me, I find that most motivating out of the stuff that we've spoke about. I find that even more motivating than like hacks or tricks or the concept of adding life expansion into the mix. Something about that, it clicked for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about housework hacks almost as a way of like trying to do less housework to escape death in a way. Not escape death, but steal back a little bit more time from the universe that you can use to do other positive things. Like that felt like part of what the attraction of like a housework hack for me was like, oh shit, if I can, with this one simple trick, if I can save 25 minutes every single week, that's 25 minutes I could spend doing any of the things that I love doing, that I want to do, that will like make my life better, or that I feel give my life meaning or whatever. So it's an interesting reframing to think about housework itself as a longevity increasing thing, where like you don't have to steal time back from housework in order to do something that you love. You can create more time at the end of your life by doing housework. It's a different cognitive filter than I was using before, but I think it's useful.
We now go to Peter Thiel's life extension compound.
Mr. Thiel, sir, Mr. Thiel, are you awake? I don't want to open up your coffin if you're still sleeping.
Ah, my blood boy. So glad to be seeing you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. So we have tons of researchers working around the clock, finding ways to help you extend your life. Obviously, you've been looking for any kind of way to keep alive as long as possible.
Yes.
We actually came back with some pretty strong research with a solid answer that should extend your life by a few years at least. Do you want to know what it is?
Whose blood do I have to drink? Is the young?
No, it has nothing to do with drinking any blood. It's nothing like that.
Huh. Who do I don't understand. Who do I kill? Just to pay someone to do something?
No, none of those things. It's actually even simpler than all of that. What you need to do is clean up after yourself, do your own housework. You could even save money by firing some of your maids and just picking up that slack yourself.
No, that can't be right. I pay for the work to be done around my house. It's part of
yeah, and that could be part of the problem.
I could drink some sort of rare element, or I could a cold bath. I could do a cold bath. Electroshock therapy, surgical. I really don't.
There, Mr. Thiel. I know this is hard for you to hear. There.
And that was Peter Thiel and his life extension compound. Now back to our show. So yeah, there's a gendered element to the politics of housework. There's also a racialized element when we talk about the history of slavery in the United States, or the use of foreign-born house cleaners in the First World, the devaluing of that type of labor that's partially because it's seen as women's labor, or it's seen as like immigrant labor. There's also the disability framework of housework, in that in our society, it's not the case that we can just split up all of the work evenly and have everyone be equally able to do that work. It has certain implications. There's also people who are, say, elderly or immobile, or they don't have full use of their hands or their legs, etc., which again implies a kind of it implies more care work that needs to be done, more housework that needs to be done. So yeah, I'm thinking about all these things, like what kind of society do we want to create? It's striking to me, I think we mentioned this in the degrowth episode, but like economists want to have 3% growth every year, 3% economic growth. And we have this unpaid housework valued at trillions of dollars that could be paid for and included in GDP. It strikes me that could be a way, if you can phase in what housework is included in the economy, you could shrink the energy and resource throughput of our global economy while slowly recording all of our invisible and unaccounted housework towards the GDP, and therefore create the kind of Excel spreadsheet illusion of growth when shrinkage is actually happening. Yeah, just a random thought, but it seems like that could be a possible pathway to trick the Excel spreadsheets that run our society into letting us do what needs to be done.
It's funny. It's like $1.5 trillion. And honestly, like, it should be paid a little above minimum. Or no, minimum wage should just be higher, I guess. Because you said $1.5 trillion worth of housework is done by women. If it was all paid at minimum wage, and I don't know if that was like the United States federal minimum wage or if they were going by state minimum wages to get that number, but that's a lot. That's a lot.
I mean, every minimum wage is pretty underpaid, even when you get to the most high liberal state minimum wages.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a lot of GDP growth. If you were to just start doing that, it would be a lot of money being pumped into the working class population of the economy. Not only would it increase GDP just directly because of, anytime you pay someone for something that's like part of GDP or whatever, but it would also like cause a boom in people being able to use that money for other things that they need in their life, which would also increase GDP.
And then, I mean, also what we should probably be doing is removing domestic labor from the sphere of, like the utopia where two people in a couple go home at the end of the day after working for the majority of their waking hours and then have to do another round of work in an egalitarian way. It's superior than having another round of work that only one partner does, or one partner does disproportionately in a way that's invisibilized, marginalized, and is sort of exploitative. Instead of that dream of egalitarianly going to do your second shift together, half and half, I think we should think about having a political conversation about how to give people more free time through like something like a universal basic housework kind of scheme, like laundromats, collectively run, environmentally friendly laundromats that do drop off and pick up for everyone, to cut one thing off of your list, or say have a collective dishwashing service. So instead of having dishwashers in every apartment, you could, you have to crunch the numbers on how to make this as environmentally friendly as possible and stuff. But designing for like the social need to get dishes done and the environmental need to live within our limits to produce optimized systems. There's a lot of things where you can like collectively get a benefit by pooling resources. Like there are people who live alone who have a dishwasher who don't need a dishwasher the size that they have, for example. A system where we have layers of support for housework, including like house cleaning and stuff on some regular schedule and stuff. Like I think that is especially the intersection between that increase in free time and the ability to produce work that needs to be done that people can do in communities, and also the need to live within our means in an environmental sense. To the degree that we can overlap that collective responsibility, that excess leisure time, and that environmental impact, I think there's something really powerful in that space that I haven't quite cracked. But I think giving people more leisure time is an extremely appealing thing, and it's something that we can connect to the environmental and climate transition that's ahead of us that we need to succeed at in order to not cook our planet and burn alive in our homes, be tortured by scarcity, and so on.
Yeah, I think thinking about housework as like any other kind of work, like just putting it on that same level of like things that we need to do to keep society running, makes it so that, yeah, whether like the person living in the house is doing all the housework and that's their job, that's their contribution to society. You don't have to have another job and then come home and do a second job. But it's like, it's a socially recognized thing. You're doing something important, keeping your house up to date. Or if it's like you do some other job and the housework is able to be done by people who prefer doing that kind of work in an economy of scale kind of situation. I think pooling the work, figuring out all the work that needs to be done, figuring out who is and isn't capable of contributing to the work, and like how much does each person actually need to do, we'd end up with a situation that has a much fairer distribution of work among people, and I think less work overall for most people, especially when you account for removing a lot of the sort of unnecessary bullshit labor that's being done. I think you can't get an honest accounting of how to increase leisure time without an honest accounting of like how much work is actually happening, and like counting things that are clearly work as work even if you're just doing them for yourself in your own house.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes when you tell people about the political agenda of reducing work hours, like something that we advocate on the show, reducing the length of the work week or the work year to reduce the amount of work that you need to do in order to have a good life. There's kind of like a thing where it's like, oh man, a day or two off work every week, I'll finally have time to do all of my housework. I'll finally have time to run all my chores and errands. And maybe you have a situation where you do get a 4-day work week, and then as a result, somehow through its sneaky tendrils, society convinces us to take on more unpaid housework out of a sense of duty, do more unpaid types of work out of like a sense of duty, just shrinking our free time again to fill the new container.
Hey everybody, it's Bonko the Clown. Honk honk. Alright kids, gather round for today's fun fact. Now this fact was so crazy that when Bonko first read it, his tie spun around. Today's fun fact is, according to the Global Estimates of Modern Slavery report by the Walk Free Foundation, there are 1.4 million enslaved domestic workers globally.
Wow, Bonko, that is a wild fact. I don't know if I would call that a fun fact, though. I don't know. Do you really think that's fun?
To learn something new is always fun. That's the Bonko the Clown way.
Yeah, I guess abstractly, but I don't know if learning that is fun. That's like, it's horrifying, right?
You're never too young to learn the truth.
Maybe like horrifying facts with Bonko the Clown, or Bonko the Clown, facts that will make your skin crawl, or spooky facts with evil clown Bonko, something like that, maybe. Because I'm assuming you don't support slavery.
Bonko the Clown doesn't support slavery at all. Honk honk. Not a nice thing to say, just because I appreciate the spreading of facts and find facts to, in themselves, have a certain quality of fun to them. You will be hearing from Bonko's lawyers if you insinuate things about Bonko the Clown. Honk honk.
Hey, now, no need to threaten me with legal action, Bonko.
It's not a threat. It is just another fun fact that people who insinuate and lie about Bonko often face lawsuits. Meep meep.
And that was another episode of Fun Facts with Bonko the Clown.
Hey everybody, it's time for the old Wrong Boys wrap-up, where at the end of the episode we have to sort of summarize what we've learned, like Sesame Street, and say goodbye to everyone and blow kisses and so on, and shout out the Patreon. Aaron, do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the kiss blowing. I'll just do a few of those. Mwah. Mwah, that's to you. Mwah, that's to you. Mwah, and you. And
I did some as well.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about all the housework-related things that we've talked about today.
Yeah. So what are the takeaways this week on housework? I mean, I think for me, it's that on housework, we want to find ways, technological or social, to reduce the amount of housework that people have to do in general. People shouldn't be overburdened with housework. And we think that the time that goes into housework should be valued, and that, you know, people who are homemakers should, regardless of gender, get a salary for doing that important work that benefits other people as well. And also maybe in the act of doing housework, in approaching the necessity that housework is done, some of the tools that we've talked about maybe using to think about that is committing to doing 5 or 10 minutes, and then sometimes doing more than that is like a little mental hack to get housework done. But also thinking about housework as something that's contributing to your health and longevity. This is something I haven't actually deployed in my life yet. It's something that came out of recording, but I'm really fascinated by that. I feel like it's mixing the exercise paradigm and the housework paradigm is something that I want to experiment in the psychological realm to see if I can motivate myself with that.
Yeah, I really get that old twofer in there. It's a good old 2-for-1. Exercise and housework.
Shampoo and conditioner style.
Yeah, peanut butter and jelly in one jar, but good. Instead of not good. I don't know, it's probably fine. I've never actually had it. I don't mean to shit on peanut butter and jelly in one jar. I'm sure there's downsides to shampoo and conditioner 2-in-1 as well. People who love hair could tell you. But everybody's house needs housework to get done. Like, nobody has a magic house that just stays clean on its own. It's something we all deal with. So I think Hopefully it's been beneficial or useful to you in some way.
Yeah, and if I could just finish on 2 thoughts. The first thought is that if you got a heck of a mess on your hands, it goes garbage, dishes, laundry, and then clutter. Order of operations. And secondly, I think the wages for housework movement is right. Capitalist society relies on unpaid housework. The value of housework is reflected indirectly in the excess wages and wealth of the people at the top. And women aren't just discriminated against, they're exploited.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to live in a moneyless, classless, stateless society of some kind where we don't have to pay wages for anything and people contribute based on their ability while receiving based on their need. But if we do live in a world where contributions to society are socially measured in their value via their wages, it makes absolutely no sense for housework to not be included in that, because it's a big part of what keeps society running, what keeps the old society machine chugging along is housework. It's important. Without it, society would fall apart. So as long as we have wages, housework should definitely be included in wages. But yeah, I think that's all the time we have this week.
That's right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
And if you listen to this episode while you're cleaning your house, I gotta say, you missed the spot.
We'll see.